Fırtınalar sarsıyor göğü, kara bulutlar körene.
I'm sitting here with Alexis Daloumis. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Before we get started as well, you're a filmmaker and you were a soldier and you've been fighting on the front lines of Rojava, Kurdistan and some in northern Syria as well. First and foremost, I'd like to express my thanks and gratitude because I think the people of the world, and particularly in this country, owe you and others like you a great debt that often goes unacknowledged. So thanks for fighting ISIS.
Thank you.
And also thank you for going out there and documenting your experiences. Like we said, you are a filmmaker, but you're also a soldier.
Well, I gotta admit at this point, hardly a professional filmmaker, I guess. But you know, an aspiring filmmaker at least, trying to make interesting films.
Right. Could you explain that relationship between being a filmmaker and a soldier? What was that like?
Well, I guess this is not something that happens very often to any filmmaker or soldier, for that matter. In this case, it was the plan from the beginning. Like, I prepared or tried to prepare for it and went to Rojava with that agenda from before. Like, it's not something that kind of came up along the way or anything. It was a very conscious decision to try and do this before I ever got there. Like, much before, in fact, because I had to wait for quite a while, like before I got to travel. So I guess you mentioned before, like the production conditions and so on. So I guess I should mention the pre-production as part of that.
Yeah.
So there was a fairly long and yet kind of disparate, period of pre-production, which was, when I say disparate, I mean kind of on and off, because I was waiting, or we were waiting for quite a while until the time I think we got like the green light to go and travel. And the fact that I was gonna bring like some extra equipment, some extra luggage, and that's it, but also electronic equipment and so on, also complicated things at times. Now, during that period, I mostly got help from a friend of mine that traveled with me, who is not to be mentioned by name, but who I guess was the first member of the so-called shadow crew, which is exactly meant to imply is all these people that helped for the making of this documentary throughout all this period, from the pre-production stage even until now in the post-production stage, which also includes the crowdfunding campaign. And so on, because I've been like the sort of the main person behind all this project. It was kind of my idea to go ahead with this, but obviously I always had help on all stages of this. There was always someone or more than one that would give a hand in this. Starting from the pre-production stage.
Right. So you mentioned the other day that you, obviously being on the front line, did you encounter many journalists, many other filmmakers like yourself, or what was your relationship to them?
I'm gonna say mostly journalists. I don't think I can. I don't think I can say there was someone doing quite exactly what I was doing. But journalists, yes, I came across quite a few. I even have footage of some of them working.
Right.
Well, some good guys most of the time. And yeah, I mean, and their situation was, always a little bit different. It's a different framework.
Right. And obviously they have the sort of freedom to be able to produce stuff that maybe someone that's actually in a fighting force doesn't actually have.
Yes, definitely.
But I mean, if you could explain what was the sort of difference between what you were able to capture and what they were able to capture.
Well, okay, this will take a bit of time. We have to look, okay. There's a few things to look at here. First of all, most journalist work happens within a time frame that makes sense in their industry. These people, they are professionals. They have to go home and edit this stuff and air it like on television or something. They have a different framework in which they have to work, but also not most of the time, all of the time. No journalist can come and stay somewhere for 18 months. It's a whole. So most of the time, journalists would get to stay. I'd say in the best case scenario, some of the most thorough works over there, at least to my knowledge, were people were staying maybe for 3 weeks. Then maybe I have some people in mind that did quite decent, quite good work. Maybe I don't know, do 3 weeks and then make a second journey, do another couple or 3 weeks, and so on. But this is usually the kind of time frame that journalists can work on. So that's one thing, obviously. Now, on top of that, or rather, further, that also means that when someone is there for 18 months and is also a soldier at the same time, fighting in the front line and so on, you get a different perspective. On one hand, you get a different understanding of things. You get a different, a different idea of what kind of questions you can like, on what to look into. So, you want to tell us why you came to Rojava?
Yeah, they asked for help. The YPG put out a call that's it's still open now, asking people who support what they're doing to come help them out. Daesh moved in and they started killing everybody. Their ideology is hateful, and it's a vision of humanity that I'm strongly against. But it was more than that. The YPG has a plan for the future. They didn't just come in to kill the enemy or conquer the land or anything of that sort. The YPG supports a democratic, a socialist, a peoples-based revolution. And I've seen it, we've all seen it here. You can go to places and see the public support. I came to the revolution because I could, because they asked for help and I was able to do it. And the only reason not to go, if you can help and you're willing to help, is fear. You can't live like that.
Your interviews are gonna be quite unique and have like quite a unique perspective, because the people you interview will relate to you or have related to you in a thorough and like more profound manner. It's people you fought with, so the way they're gonna respond to the interview is gonna have a qualitative difference,
right,
in how they relate to you and how they open up, but also in what I know I can ask.
Right.
Because I already know what I can ask them. I already know what they know, and I can dig into stuff that others wouldn't think of. For example, and so on. And we've been through like some of the same stuff together. So I can make very targeted questions in some cases. So that's one thing which is very important. Now, another thing is that being a soldier, you have much more opportunity to capture everyday life moments, or even to anticipate certain things that you would wanna film. It also brings you like in the front line or in a certain military environment, even if it's not the front line, all of the time. Well, journalists, they have to undergo a certain process and get this and that and get this amount of time, and like I said before, work through a specific schedule and get this shot and this shot and this shot. Well, while working like this is obviously much more chaotic, for one thing, much less professional probably, and it definitely comes with a lot of handicap as well, because you cannot, because on the other hand, these people, like journalists or even filmmakers, which I just didn't come across many, but there were. I know that there were people who were filmmakers rather than journalists.
Mm-hmm. Were there others like you who were doing the same sorts of roles?
I can't say for sure. I wouldn't say. I mean, maybe there might have been. I can say that I know there were soldiers that had some kind of camera with them, but I don't know of anyone who had a specific agenda to shoot a documentary and and carry that all the way through. I think most people I knew had they mostly had action cameras or something like that. They would take pictures or would make videos, but I don't know of anybody else that was a soldier to be making interviews, for example.
Right. So you went out there with that specific agenda to make a documentary about the revolution in Rojava, but you also went out there with the agenda to fight as well.
Yes, and let me add that what I just said as well, that also reflected the equipment, if you like, in very material terms, that I had a quite compact and quite practical semi-professional camera, Canon XC10, which I am also gonna say, because it's kind of random, but I think it's kind of interesting to mention.
Yeah.
I very much regretted that for two reasons, mostly, and mostly the second one. The first one would be the ring zoom. The ring zoom is not practical. It's not. I regret that. It gave me trouble many times. It is overall a good camera and a good as it's sometimes called. Run and gun camera or something. That sounds probably a Yankee term.
It's very apt.
It's like for this sort of. It's meant to be for this sort of thing.
Yeah.
However, point number one: ring zoom, very bad. Not like very bad for run and gun stuff as well. Because you wanna, because the ring zoom you can't really work. I mean, you can, but it's very very. It's not practical. Like you can't really use it in motion.
Mm-hmm.
I'd much rather have a button where you can adjust the speed as well and push it.
Right. So
if you
go into the front line, you want autofocus basically.
And the second thing, much more importantly, night vision. It didn't have night vision. I didn't think that. It was probably the biggest mistake in pre-production.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time regretting that. That was a dreadful mistake. Mm-hmm. And it goes both for the main camera and for the other two, because I also had this. Okay, this is a little bit chaotic now, but I had another couple of cameras, which were action cameras that were strapped on the head, on the side of the head. Yes, I believe it's better to have also for these purposes.
I was going to ask you about the GoPros.
Yes,
you have some.
It's not GoPros. It was Sony something, by the way. But and I was going to say, because GoPros are usually kind of like this, you know, like on the. I tend to believe that it's better. The shot, from the side of the head, is better, and overall more practical to have a strap that you get just about here. I think, I tend to believe that it's better, but again, this is slightly different budget, but you can squeeze. Like I think there is some solutions that are not completely like inaccessible. You want to have night vision option there also. So I didn't have a night vision either in these or the main camera, and I would put that down as the biggest regret I have in technical issues.
You have some quite staggering footage of a Sony camera on your head where you're running around, well, not necessarily you, but could be any number of people.
Let's make that very clear. Let me make that very clear for all sorts of purposes. When there is footage coming from a head camera, it doesn't necessarily mean it is me wearing the camera or operating the weaponry depicted.
Right. Your production team also consisted of a number of other people who may have been wearing those cameras as well, and some of the mistakes that you encountered from that process are actually quite interesting or funny as a filmmaker. I
mean, yeah, sure, of course. There was, I had a good number of hours of, of content which was like the inside of someone's pocket,
right,
and things like that, or footage that was never really there. So would say, check the footage from this. It must be, and there was nothing because they never pressed the button properly or whatever, and things like that. So yeah, that was part, or some footage is very wonky because they wore the camera not properly and it's like tilting too much on one side or something and everything is like this and it's kind of there was definitely quite a bit of that.
So from that process, you collected hundreds, potentially, of hours of footage. How do you even begin to go about managing that in sort of post-production?
I don't think I can. But I really, really need highly skilled professional labor, as it is mentioned in the trailer as well, and especially if anyone thinks that this footage, the interviews, all of this material has a significant historical worth, which I do, it really needs to be, to be given justice to it, to be given or done justice to it. It really needs, to give it justice. It really needs some very skilled and very experienced professionals to process it. Now, I've edited a few quite successful videos that went viral on the social media and stuff and so on, but that is a totally different, I am not a professional editor. And it's a totally different framework, and it's a different medium almost to make 5-minute YouTube videos with music that may go viral. It's a totally different thing than actually make a film. And also all the technical processing that is required for the image and the sound. I have severe sound issues in a lot of footage that is actually quite important. And it's not even there is dire need for professional skilled labor.
Right. I mean those
and equipment. And
equipment well.
And high grade equipment, not the car. I'm still operating with a factory refurbished Asus that I go with some different parts of it, some with the parts stuck onto it.
Right. And you just do your editing on the laptop.
Yeah, that's all I.
Premiere or something.
Yeah, Premiere.
Right. Yeah.
Like a hacked version of Premiere.
Right.
No shame in admitting that. Fuck you.
Şehit Taca Seregelen Reperete Koşina Mana Sakın Kujarinamu.
I want to sort of bring it back back to the production process of the film,
Yeah.
because I still find that quite fascinating. Just this idea that you would be doing any kind of your duties as a soldier at any given point. Would you be carrying around a camera with you as well? Would you be wearing a camera on your head? Would you be going out to the front line and think such and such, whatever equipment you need plus camera? Or what would be the thinking going through your mind when this was taking place?
The general condition was that I had some extra luggage than, in any given circumstance, or rather in the general circumstance. I had like a whole extra set of luggage, a whole extra set of stuff than, anybody else,
right.
Any other soldier. And if we wanna, put that into an image, it was very often the case that I would have a strap, like on one shoulder would be the strap of my Kalashnikov, and on the other shoulder would be the strap of my tripod and the camera. So I would be wearing a rack with 4 or 6 or even 8 sometimes, like magazines,
right.
And anything between 2 and 4 grenades, and all that. Basically all the standard equipment. And everything else, in my my weapons, my Kalashnikov, and so on. And on top of that, like the camera and the tripod, going like that, jumping on and off the back of the truck like that, and so on. But especially because I mentioned particularly the tripod, because the tripod is also almost like a shape as well, with the strap and everything. It's kind of like a weapon as well. It's kind of like it's a similar process of hanging it on. So it would be a very typical thing, like Kalash on one side, tripod on the other.
So when you...
Kalash is what they call the Kalashnikov.
But I mean, you mentioned a tripod. It takes obviously a while to set up a tripod with a camera on it. Were there any instances where you'd gone out and thought, I'll take the tripod because I might have time to set up? I mean, this is frontline sort of stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, in some cases. I would usually have the tripod somewhere, I would usually bring it along, surely not every instance would allow for a tripod. Yeah. Often it was camera in hand, and so on. And obviously in some cases I couldn't use the main big camera. Like I would only be able to use the head camera.
Right.
However, I mean, also the tripod. I mean, I had to be a bit innovative at some points. Not that it's something very original, but in fact, the tripod was very useful, of course, obviously in many instances, and also, I mean, it was I specifically it was given to me as a present from a friend, but it was particularly good for this because it's a particularly light tripod. Yeah, very light and quite easy to handle, let's say. And in some cases, it would be very, very useful, because in some cases, I would use it like this. Like I would use it almost as a Steadicam, sort of, somewhat, right. But also for like high compte plongée.
Aerial shots.
Kind of, not really, but I would I have some shots like that, like with the airborne, with the tripod fully extended, and sort of like this.
Just
some
like
of
a high
them
angle,
almost blind.
Right.
Some of them almost blind, or to the extent that I could catch a glimpse of the LCD over there.
Right.
And operate it like this.
But sometimes it's just point and pray.
Yeah. I mean, also if it was in some shots, it worked quite well. Like it gave me that gave me some shots I couldn't possibly have otherwise, and it was actually quite
Right. And was there ever some stuff that you captured where you'd gone back and looked at it and gone, fucking hell, this is good, or this is just not good necessarily, the wrong terminology to use, but did you start to develop a conscious of what is a good and bad shot and what is good and bad content is? Sure,
and it was often it was often as well things that things that came from head cameras, where I was some of the most compelling stuff, like, or the most exciting,
Right.
Or even spectacular, if you like, because however, on the other hand, a lot of the essence of what is going on is in the interviews. It's not, it's not as exciting to see a talking head, but actually it's very important in terms of substance,
Yeah.
But to what you asked, I would say, I mean, surely there was moments like that, but I would say I can remember, or like now that you asked it, I thought my first thought was mostly the opposite. Like mostly the opposite. Like looking at some footage and something like, fuck! Like
what? Because it's bad, or
because something is just off, or missing, or like or like the shot, like, because again, it's difficult conditions. In some cases, maybe you have to set the camera on the tripod, try to lock it. It did, sometimes something wouldn't work very well, or whatever, or like try to, estimate what the frame will look like. So you have to like set the camera somewhere, like in an angle, in the corner somewhere, try to capture it, and then just go and be a soldier, and maybe even be part of the frame. And then later on, you would discover, no, I wish that was like just a hint more up or whatever.
Yeah. So you were learning to be a filmmaker as you were learning to navigate the life of a soldier in that particular environment as well.
Yeah, like, I mean, I've done. It is probably it is definitely the most ambitious film I've ever made. And
200 hours of...
like I said, I'm hardly a professional, but however, I have made some films before of a very, at best, semi-professional level, but definitely nothing like this. So yeah, I was definitely learning along the way how to make a film like this, because I guess there isn't even a lot of films like this. Not many people are crazy enough to go and do this,
Yeah.
Like there's very few people are crazy enough to go to, like, let's spend a year and a half in fighting ISIS in the Middle East. Far even more so, people who are willing to try and make a film at the same time. So it's not something that happens often. And there's a good reason for that. And when I say I'm not professional, I'll tell you another thing. When I say I'm not, I'm hardly a professional, most professionals, especially like professionals that are experienced professionals, would not tolerate to work like that. Because it was not just exhausting, but also infuriating at times. It was a difficult condition to work in many ways. And yeah, I'll say that because I remember thinking about that, like when I was that. Yeah, of course, it's basically an amateur doing this film. No professional would take all this shit. Literally, no professional would take so much shit.
Do you mean by shit? Do you mean the conditions of being?
Yeah, or even the attitudes of the people towards but.
Do you mean interviewees, or do you mean?
No. Overall, anything.
Right.
So yeah, it's no accident that this sort of film doesn't happen very often, and it's no accident that this film was shot by someone who's somewhere between amateur and professional at best.
Right.
Onları gördünüz. Pencereleri tarayın. Tam pencereleri tarayın. Hadi. Geç.
So moving into this question of post-production, you shot about 200, or maybe even more, hours of footage documenting not just the front lines but also the ordinary lives of just the situation, what it's like to be out there. Obviously, all of that can't go into a feature-length documentary. So what do you intend to do with this wealth of material that you've created?
So this is an important question. It is very true that like my plans about this go indeed much further than a single film. I mean, obviously, the film is something that is a more popular thing. There is, however, an admittedly much more niche kind of work that I think is, however, important, which has to do more with historiography. And the aim, as it is stated as well in the main texts of the campaign, is that we want to try and process and make available as much of the material as possible. And this is also also resonates with the aim of the campaign, which may have a minimum goal, but is basically going for as much as possible, exactly because the more resources we have, the better work we can do, but also the more work we can do. We can process more of the material, translate it in more languages, and so on and so forth. But more importantly, beyond the film, there is a whole spectrum of archive material, historical archive material that is gonna be relevant to much less people. It's gonna be interesting to much less people. But that is how historiography works. That's how archives work as well. So I think, and given that there is, if you like, a growing trend, there has been, and there still is, a growing momentum even in contemporary historiography for what is called oral, what is often referred to as oral history. This is more or less what this is. It's a massive archive of oral history, which, however, is, because usually oral history is a lot to do about memory and all that. This is a little bit different, but I think it still qualifies as oral history. But it's much more in the moment. Mm-hmm. It's captured. It's things that are not. It's not people, narrating things that happened, 2 or 3 decades ago. But maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, or
even just talking about what situation is taking place then,
right now. Exactly. And in any case, whatever you want to call it, it is historical archive. And as long as someone thinks that this historical instance, that this war, is of seminal importance in our time. And I do think that. I think it's one of the most important historical events of our time. Mm-hmm. I think it is worth to preserve, to process and to preserve this archive. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very valuable archive. And it will be, it's valuable now, it's interesting now, but that's the thing in terms of historiography, it will be very valuable in 50 years' time as well. And this is why, maybe the film will have been totally forgotten by then or something, but at the archive, for historians, it will be potentially very valuable.
All right. So you plan to process not just the footage that you use in the film, but the whole load of it. I mean, obviously that is,
and that means a lot of translation as well.
Yeah, and a shit ton of money.
Yes, and I want to mention, because we've had this idea since we started planning the post-production. We want ideally to give all Arabic and Kurdish translation, we want to give this work to refugees, and in fact, ideally to refugees of this war.
Right.
And I'm pretty confident this is going to be feasible.
Right.
As long as we have the money.
So you would like to involve victims of refugees from the war in the process of post-production. So the film
and it makes sense in many ways. And in fact, I already got one.
Right.
For Arabic.
Okay.
But ideally, we'd want to share this work between more people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Both mostly for Kurmanji and Arabic.
So it really becomes a collective process in post-production. You mentioned the other day in the film there is no protagonist. There is no one part. There are sometimes people that are there more often and sometimes not. What structure then do you envisage the feature documentary taking? If there is no one person to follow, is it going to follow a narrative structure, or is it going to be?
Okay, so first of all, maybe to mention, it's something obviously in a different scale, and in like I said, in films that cannot be necessarily described as professional films. I've done this before. It's not completely new to me, and I like this as an idea as well. Now, the dominant way of building narratives, and some people will suggest it's also a kind of American way of building narratives, but I don't know if that's important or not. But anyway, is to have a main character as the vehicle of the narrative, and to follow a main character and make it and there's recent films that actually reflect that so much, where also the narrative becomes a lot about the individual and their feelings and how they grow and their journey and all that, there is a quite specific concept of how these things work, and most especially in the industry, most documentary films will most often aim to be like that. So this is not just an accident. Although I did consider that myself, my first thought was I'll follow one character, because that's what that's
or
kind
even yourself.
Of the first. No, actually, I wanted to follow another character.
Right.
In fact, I never really wanted to follow myself, but here we'll have. Okay, on one hand, this didn't work out anyway, but I will insist it's not an accident. It didn't just happen, because it's not the first time I do this as well. And I know I've seen, in a different scale again, but I've seen how a collective narrative can work, even in terms of editing, how you can cross-edit people in a way that actually gives a lot of dynamic. In a way, it almost makes the narrative more credible, and it's a different kind of narrative.
Yeah.
But it's kind of you can definitely do that. I have done it before. And it's definitely feasible, and I think it's quite refreshing as well. Because especially for something like this, it's not some fucking, it's not this kind of, this kind of individual focus narrative, of and I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not saying we shouldn't make films like that.
Yeah.
Because sure, that also makes sense. Sometimes it's a little bit too much, I think. Sometimes it's sometimes it's I kind of have something in mind now. I won't mention. I don't even remember the title. But it's not about any specific film. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you have. You have a film that is supposed to be about something very important and very like a war zone, like a massive conflict with enormous bloodshed and a lot of global geostrategic interests and all that, and you go into it and you follow it, and it ends up being a story about a boy coming of age. Mm-hmm. I kind of resent that sometimes. Right. I have to say. So in any case, I'm pretty confident there can be a quite compelling narrative. And if anything, the absence of a main character exactly doesn't, rather protects the narrative
Right.
from becoming, something about this guy and how he feels or whatever.
Right. So
Or
focus,
that woman and her journey and her thought,
yeah.
So that it becomes a more collective narrative, and hopefully it reflects more and better, like what is going on and what a lot of people think about it, rather than a main character. As much as this is considered less digestible by the average consumer or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of how it's gonna work, well, like I mentioned in the presentation before, there is definitely a time frame here. There's definitely an actual timeline, which is the real time, is the timeline when all of this happened, because this material spans in a very specific period of time, like from the Battle of Manbij in summer 2016 until the Battle of Raqqa, the effective destruction of the Caliphate, and all the way until the very last minute before I left, which is like the peripheral elections of the December 2nd, 2017.
Coming to Rojava was like a kind of going to a place to find hope. Let's call that like this. And I must say, I found it.
We arrived in a bit of a turning point in this whole war, which was the Battle of Manbij. When we arrived, the Battle of Manbij was like raging. Now it's worth to sorry, I'm just altogether. It's worth to mention that the Battle of Manbij was actually probably a more critical battle than the Battle of Raqqa. In fact, it was probably the most critical and the bloodiest battle of this whole war after the Battle of Kobani. It was the point, it was a turning point in the war as well. It was the point where Daesh lost the war, effectively. Because after that, Daesh was not only surrounded, but basically they also kind of had nowhere to go anymore. And even more so, we cut off their supply lines from Turkey, which was very essential to their survival and to their agenda in general. Like they used the Turkish border quite a lot. Like it was quite critical to them. And the liberation of Manbij stopped that. And as a few people said even back then, I remember in fact the late Shahid Mehmet, martyr Shahid Mehmetullah Bayraktaroglu, he was saying back then, when he was in the front line in Manbij, that we're going to finish this war right here with this battle. Because everybody knew this, everybody knew about the critical importance of Manbij for Daesh. And they also fought fiercely for it. It was a very, very bloody battle. And YPG lost a lot of people and a lot of cadres.
That's the YPG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we arrived like pretty much in the midst of this battle, and we found ourselves in the front line of this battle extremely soon after we had just arrived. We arrived in the basically the 1st of July into Rojava, and we were in Manbij in the front, like in the front. Not pretty much the. I mean, there's levels of front line, but it is like the front, what we call the Jeppe. So we arrived in the front of Manbij battle on the 12th day, on our 12th day in Rojava, and with a total of 8 days of training, which is not normal. It's not what usually happens, and I think this partly happened, or mostly even, because of the aspect of the camera and all that. That there was this, there was this aspect about us that we were, we had a camera with us, and there's this guy who he's a cameraman and he's shooting, and people wanted the opportunity to have propaganda footage of this battle,
right,
or footage in general of this battle, so for the use of propaganda or whatever.
Your status as a filmmaker accelerated your
in this case, yes, definitely, yes.
Right. Wow.
Well, like I mentioned before, it was a bit of a strange balance. Like as much as like I said, sometimes the two roles undermined each other, and I mean, okay, on the one hand, especially being a filmmaker definitely undermined being a soldier most of the time. But in terms of the other way around, it was kind of mixed. Because sure, it's very simple to understand. You have to be a soldier at the same time, so you don't have the same kind of time even to deal with this. Or maybe you want to shoot something, but you're also a soldier, and it's time to go. So this, so that's that.
Yeah.
But also, like I mentioned before, in some cases, it gives you opportunities you wouldn't have as a journalist.
Right.
After the Battle of Manbij, the forces of IFB kind of came together. And at that point, also a few internationals that were involved with different Turkish parties also came together. Maybe I should specify at this point that the IFB was originally formed primarily by the Turkish left. There was a couple of other groups, international groups, involved in the beginning, but the organizations that have consistently administered the IFB are basically three, and it was Melekap, Berg, which is the military wing of DKP basically, and Tiko, which is the military wing of TKP.
Okay, this is three different organisations congealing in order to form that one international freedom battalion.
Yes.
Right.
And in the beginning, in my understanding, and when I say my understanding, that also includes what people have directly told me, but it wasn't exactly meant to be an international battalion like it ended up being, but more like a kind of just a sort of collective identity that Turkish revolutionary parties could sort of collectively claim to have a vehicle to present themselves,
right? Yeah,
so to speak. Because it was also preferable not to promote not to show too much their presence there as Turkish leftist armed leftist parties.
Is that because they wouldn't be able to get back into Turkey, or because
for all sorts of reasons?
Right.
It was even kind of, I guess, for some people it was advisable. Like some of these parties are outlawed. It would and also the Turkish regime would always use any indication to say that there's a bunch of terrorists there or whatever. This is what I would roughly guess. Now the point is, so it started off like this, and along the way, especially after that period that the propaganda team was active, it got to be much more thoroughly international than it ever was before. And I am quite positive, and most other people are as well, that this is directly linked to the propaganda work that was done in this hardly couple of months that the propaganda team was active.
Okay, so you're making films, you're putting them out there, and people are responding, literally responding in ways that...
Videos rather than... Yeah,
videos, sort of on like YouTube and Facebook and...
Yeah, primarily Facebook, in fact, because we were at the time when the propaganda team was active, we were, our main platform, let's say, of propaganda is the revived IFB Facebook page. Now, there used to be a Facebook page before when like some German dude like tried to do something like that, and then it just perished along with him going back home, and apparently people didn't even have the codes, because so we tried to revive that. We made a new page, like I mentioned before, specifically after that video, which I think was published as Summer 2006 International Freedom Battalion, 2016 obviously, International Freedom Battalion. Or the one that is also often mentioned as the dancing video.
Right, quite famous dancing video now.
In the so-called Rojava internet crowd, for sure. Especially after this video, that page got a lot of traction. So on the one hand, just as a page and as a media outlet, it got quite a lot more audience. It had like about 2,000 subscribers at some point, and I mean likes, but effectively. And after that video, it got to like 8,000 within a matter of days almost, and after a few weeks or so it got to like 11,000, and by the time that it was shut down, it was up to almost more than 14,000.
Facebook shut it down.
Yes.
Arrived back obviously from Rojava, and you are going around campaigning, trying to raise some money for this film. You're going all over Europe, and how's all that going?
Well, mostly Northern Europe for now. There is also, this tour is meant to like coincide with the duration of the campaign as well, so there is a limited amount of time that I can tour within the time frame of the campaign. It's possible I might make some presentations even after that. Well, for now I started with the UK. We're in Manchester right now. We have an event scheduled for tonight, and the campaign hasn't actually been launched on the internet yet, on the Indiegogo platform. But it will be by the time this video is released. I guess I have a pretty long way to cover in front of me. I will be doing several stops within the UK, several events, presentations. So after the UK, I will be going into Belgium. From then on, in a few events in France. After that, quite a few in Switzerland, then Germany, and then Poland. So far, that is that's what's been planned so far. Altogether, there are more than 20 events all along this journey. Not sure about the exact number actually, but quite definitely more than 20.
But the purpose of all of this is it to raise money for the post production, or is that?
I mean, it's a mixed it's a mixed purpose. Like it's obviously these are fundraising events at the same time, like to raise funds for the campaign, support and promote the crowdfunding campaign.
Right. We'll put a link at that up at the end as well for the crowdfunding.
Brilliant. And however, at the same time, it's not just collecting money; it's also promoting the campaign in the sense of giving how to say, in the sense of publicity. Making these events, people are getting interested, engaged. They will then share something on Facebook about it, or Twitter, or whatever, or Instagram, which I've just discovered is a thing.
Right.
You're
just getting tuned into Facebook and Instagram, aren't you, as a result of having to do all this?
I discovered first of all that Facebook owns Instagram, and I only actually made Instagram 2 days ago.
Joy.
And I'm still like figuring it out. Right. I also don't know much about Twitter.
Right.
I've only managed to get a basic command of how Facebook works.
Right. So you're also looking for people to help by sharing the crowdfunding campaign as well as
definitely,
to it as
definitely.
Well. Right.
And I mean, that's the kind of very contemporary way of sharing. But there's also old school ways of sharing things.
Showing up to events and giving me some cash.
Or just telling people about it orally with your mouth. That can also work. And also, in this journey, you meet people also, and I'm still talking about the campaign because there's even beyond that. But you meet people that might offer to help in all sorts of ways, and that's important as well. But also, even beyond all that, even beyond the campaign and the film itself,
right.
It's it's a process. It's a journey within which you get to engage with with a lot of people and discuss not just the film, but what the film is about.
Yeah.
Like the war and the revolution, the Rojava revolution, what it is about, how we can support it, how we can be critical as well, and and all this stuff, and all this is also important.
Yeah, I was going to ask, just as a last sort of question, what is the ultimate aim of the film? What do you hope to achieve? You've mentioned some of the happy accidents, if you like, that are coming out of the campaign, insofar as you're meeting people and you talk about the revolution. But what do you think the film's role would be? There
is a lot that will depend on the editing team in terms of what exactly the film will look like. So I guess I can mostly speak of quite general intentions.
Okay.
And to that I can say, well, it definitely wants to highlight the historical importance of all these events. It wants to engage as many people as possible with this revolution and what it means. But even more importantly, I would say, apart from like the critical support to this revolution, it's meant to inspire people about revolution, about that in one way or another. And when it's real, when something is real, it's not like, it's never like in the brochure. But it's also about that revolution is possible. This film is meant to convey that revolution is something real in this day and age. It's not some kind of relic of the past. It's not something that used to happen back in the day when, I don't know, the world hadn't yet taken shape or something. It's meant
before the end.
It's meant, as I kind of mentioned in a somewhat notorious video, it's meant to go against ideas of the end of history and bullshit like that. And I guess so in that sense, without necessarily, without necessarily wanting to mindlessly glorify everything about this revolution and everything, it is meant to engage people, to get people interested about this revolution in particular, but even more so about revolution in general as a prospect for our future. Because what is going on now is not working out.
Mm-hmm. Just a bit. Alexis Daloumis, thank you very much. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes,